Hello, my name is Susie Q. Smith, and I'm happy to welcome you to session one of a writing workshop out of 16. Welcome to There Will Probably Be Crying. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to look at some slides together, and this is our beginning. In this workshop series, we will explore our own stories, identities, experiences, ideas, and self-language through reading, writing, and in-depth discussion. And in our case, because we're working together remotely, that discussion will take place in a Google Classroom or via email. Each week, we will dive into texts, videos, and sometimes music to evaluate approaches to create mental imagery or suggest mood and set tone, and just become more aware of the language we use for our own beliefs and our perceptions. The series is designed to help open doors for you in your writing. Sometimes you'll write a ton, sometimes you might feel the gears beginning to turn and new ideas will spark for you to return to later. My hope is that you will find some new ways into your writing, into language, and learn some new things about yourself while we're at it. I will invite you to write whatever comes. You might write poems, you might write stories, you might write letters, you might write affirmations and intentions, you might write a guided meditation. I have no idea, maybe a mantra, no telling. People write all kinds of things in workshop with me, and I think that allowing yourself to just be free to explore whatever happens, we're going to just point at a bunch of doors, and who knows what's going to happen on the other side of it. But hopefully, it gets some feelings going, some thinking happening, and a lot of writing at least started. So, all of that's going to happen. We might feel some big feelings. We're going to talk about all kinds of things, and you might need to pause for a moment, and that's always okay, and move on when you're ready to get through the course. Sometimes you might be ready to jump through two or three in a week. Sometimes you might need a few weeks to take a pause, take a breath, and then come back to it. And again, this is totally at your pace, so whatever feels comfortable for you, and you can revisit it again and again, as many, many people have done. So you would not be alone in that effort. I titled this course That Will Probably Be Crying because we're talking about a lot of things that trigger some big emotions, that contain a lot of big emotions. And so as I was thinking about this, I designed this course in 2020 while a lot of people were at home and feeling big feelings and kind of sitting with them and feeling isolated in that. And so as I was like designing this course and thinking about like what might be helpful for people in a time to navigate some of this, and how can I use what I've learned and what has been useful and what I do in the world to be useful to people during this time. And since then, we've had full cohorts again and again every year. So, all that being said, that led to the title of this course. There will probably be crying. To be fair, oftentimes the crying is mine when people share their work with me. So it may not be yours, and there's no wrong way. I wanted to start with this poem from Adrienne Rich, Diving into the Wreck. You may have heard it before, and as often as possible, I do like to have the poet's voice, and be able to hear the poem as the way that the author intended it. And so in this case, we do have this in Adrienne Rich's voice, and this is Diving into the Wreck.
And this is called Diving into the Wreck. First, having read the Book of Myths and loaded the camera and checked the edge of the knife blade, I put on the body armor of black rubber, the absurd flippers, the grave and awkward mask. I'm having to do this not like Cousteau with his assiduous team aboard the sun-flooded schooner, but here alone. There is a ladder. The ladder is always there, hanging innocently close to the side of the schooner. We know what it is for, we who have used it. Otherwise, it is a piece of maritime floss, some sundry equipment. I go down, rung after rung, and still the oxygen immerses me, the blue light, the clear atoms of our human air. I go down. My flippers cripple me. I crawl like an insect down the ladder, and there is no one to tell me where the ocean will begin. First, the air is blue, and then it is bluer, and then green, and then black. I am blacking out, and yet my mask is powerful. It pumps my blood with power. The sea is another story. The sea is not a question of power. I have to learn alone to turn my body without force in the deep element. And now it is easy to forget what I came for among so many who have always lived here, swaying their crenellated fans between the reefs. And besides, you breathe differently down here. I came to explore the wreck. The words are purposes. The words are maps. I came to see the damage that was done and the treasures that prevail. I stroke the beam of my lamp slowly along the flank of something more permanent than fish or weed, the thing I came for, the wreck and not the story of the wreck, the thing itself and not the myth, the drowned face always staring towards the sun, the evidence of damage worn by salt and sway into this threadbare beauty, the ribs of the disaster curving their assertion among the tentative haunters. This is the place, and I am here, the mermaid whose dark hair streams black, the merman in his armored body. We circle silently about the wreck. We dive into the hold. I am she, I am he, whose drowned face sleeps with open eyes, whose breasts still bear the stress, whose silver, copper, vermeil cargo lies obscurely inside barrels half wedged and left to rot. We are the half-destroyed instruments that once held to a course, the water-eaten log, the fouled compass. We are, I am, you are, by cowardice or courage, the one who find our way back to the scene, carrying a knife, a camera, a book of myths in which our names do not appear.
And so this is Diving into the Wreck by Adrienne Rich. And as you look at this poem and think about it, I'll invite you to just to think about what lines really made you lean in. Where did you notice something that made you go, or what? Or that you really, really want to wrestle with a little bit, right? When I think about this poem, I think for me, it really there are a couple of stanzas that really, really jump out. Well, there are so many, really. But I think, first of all, like just the process of going down, right? And I think about when we're writing things that are deeply emotional, it's important to be able to like navigate some spaces and even excavate without drowning, without getting lost, right? And so I love that there's a ladder, right? There's a ladder is always there, hanging innocently close to the side of the schooner, right? And so I think of sometimes the writing practice can be that ladder for us, knowing it's there. We're going to dive in, but we need to know where that ladder is, right? And so kind of knowing what we've come for and coming back up the way that we came out so we don't get stuck and lost inside the things that we're writing. And so going with a really, really clear intention of like, okay, here's the ladder, here's the things keeping me tethered, right? So sometimes I recommend just before diving into a heavy writing practice is just to spend some time examining like kind of where you are right now and looking around, maybe just jotting down like just some imagery and some description of the room that you're in, of what you can see, what sounds you can hear, what do you smell? Is there a taste in your mouth? Right? What textures and temperatures do you feel on your skin? What does the air feel like? And these can be some things to sort of ground yourself and create that tether before you dive into the wreck, which we may or may not do together. That part's totally up to you. But that's one of the things that I think about is this ladder. And I think about it in my own practice. And sometimes we do get like, we get into this, we start like diving into a thing and forget what we came for, right? And so I love that this poem points that out. And now it is easy to forget what I came for among so many who have always lived here, right? And we kind of can get lost in this world of our creative imagination or memory. And so, having that tether and remembering what we're there for. And here, where this voice, the speaker remembers, right? I came to explore the wreck. The words are purposes. The words are maps, right? And then the thing I came for, the wreck, and not the story of the wreck. and really, really getting into it and then coming back up, right? So diving into the wreck, knowing that this is the place, you're here in the wreck, and then eventually, right, coming back up and returning to it again and again, right? By cowardice or courage, the one who find our way back to this scene, carrying a knife, a camera, right? And so knowing like which tools, a book of myths in which our names do not appear. And so all of these different tools that you might need as you're continuing to excavate the things that you want to excavate. So that's part of why I wanted to start with that poem. So now we're going to get into our first exercise. And with this, I would recommend having a physical piece of paper and pen that you can draw with, because we are going to get into a little drawing exercise. Our first writing exercise together is going to be drawing. And so I'll set a timer for us for 3 minutes. And for this exercise, I'm inviting you to draw a self-portrait. This can be literal or figurative, totally up to you. So if you feel like you're a little teapot, short and stout, if you feel like you're a mountain, if you feel like you're an animal or something from nature, if you feel like you're a series of squiggly lines, or perhaps you want to draw an actual portrait of yourself, and maybe it's a portrait of how you feel right now, maybe it's a portrait of a version of yourself that you enjoy remembering. Maybe it's an aspirational self, right? Totally up to you. Whatever you feel like for this self portrait. We're only going to take 3 minutes. So it's important to think about. And in this 3 minutes, I'll invite you to draw this self portrait with your non dominant hand. And if you'd really like to challenge yourself and maybe crack yourself up a little bit, you can try drawing it with your non-dominant hand and in a single line, meaning that the pen won't come off of the paper and all of the lines are connected. So I'm going to set this timer for 3 minutes and I'll draw along with you. Ready, set. You can pause if you need to get more paper. And go. And we'll take about 20 more seconds on this exercise. Feel free to put any final details on that you'd like. How was that exercise for you? As promised, I was right there with you. And here we are. She's pretty modern. There's my self-portrait. Non-dominant hand, single line. She's messy, but I think she's kind of cute. I don't know. I did something there. So I'm gonna find this in my notebook later, and it will make me laugh. So this exercise can be helpful, I think, though, in just getting a little bit more fluid and also just letting go. I think that's part of it, and letting go of our expectation to create something phenomenal and genius. We can just be curious about what's going to happen. And every time I've done this exercise, I'm never really sure what's next. I don't know what I'm going to draw. So as we're thinking about that, and you're looking at your own self-portrait, what are you noticing about it? What stands out to you? I'm going to share my screen with you again here. Thinking about like, are there details specifically? Like, I think my hair for me is definitely showing up, right? I was careful. I gave myself eyelashes a little bit. The nose feels really prominent. And then, but I've got a lot of hair kind of covering and obscuring the face here. And so I think for me, that's what I'm really noticing in my details today about my portrait is that, and also she looks a little hostile, which is not reflective of how I feel, but she's got kind of a scowl on her face, right? Do you see this? She's got a little tood, it looks like. And so, um, I'm not sure what that says about the non-dominant hand. Maybe she's trying to express another side of me. But there we are. So thinking about what do you notice? What stands out? Are there details that you would like to shift? Or are there things that are just really intriguing to you? So we'll talk about Audre Lorde probably quite a few times in our time together, because I think that she was just such a profound writer, prolific writer, and a profound thinker, speaker. And so we'll look at a fair amount of her work. But I think about this quote quite a lot. Audre Lorde said, "If I didn't define myself for myself, I would be crunched into other people's fantasies for me and eaten alive. My poetry, my life, my work, my energies for struggle were not acceptable unless I pretended to match somebody else's norm. I learned that not only couldn't I succeed at that game, but the energy needed for that masquerade would be lost to my work." I think about this often and thinking about other people's ideas of me, expectations and stories and myths, as Adrienne Rich mentioned, right? And thinking about all of the ways that people expect us to show up, would like for us to show up, demand that we show up, and all of the ways that they try to describe us. And so I wanted to mention this so we can dive into our first writing exercise together. And so we'll take a few minutes, and I do have a little timer on our screen, so we'll take 10 minutes all together. And of course, you can pause and take as much time as you like if you'd like to stretch this out. I think that sometimes having a timer can help us to dive in with a really clear expectation of the amount of time we're going to invest, but also sort of keeps us from having to think too heavily about what we're going to write. And you just got to jump right in there and see what happens. And so I'll recommend that we'll read through all of the prompts together. If there's one that you end up staying with and that's the only one that is really resonant, you find yourself writing in one, that's totally fine. If you want to write a little bit about each of these, that's also totally fine. So I'll read all of the prompts and then I'll set the timer. We'll come back together in 10 minutes. And wherever you have, hopefully some doors have opened up for you. And thinking again about diving into the wreck, thinking about your self-portrait, and also thinking about the Audre Lorde quote and the ways that other people's fantasies might try to define you and the ways you prefer to define yourself. And so, on that note, what language have others tried to crunch you into? What adjectives or titles or labels do people offhandedly assign to you? What is one fact you want everyone to know about you? What is one fact you want everyone to forget about you? What is your favorite part of your physical self? What is a scar you love? When you look in the mirror, what feature seems the most essential to your identity? When the people who know and love you best describe you, what words do they use? Which parts of the description do you agree with? And what do they miss? So again, feel free to dive into any one of these or several of them, or try to answer all of them. We'll take 10 minutes. And whenever you are at a good stopping point, we will move on. If you'd like to pause here and take more time to write, that's totally okay. Again, this is at your own pace. And when you're ready, hit play again. For now, I'll bring us into our next piece. This is a quote from Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes in her book, Women Who Run with the Wolves. The doors to the world of the wild self are few but precious. If you have a deep scar, that is a door. If you have an old, old story, that is a door. If you love the sky and the water so much you almost cannot bear it, that is a door. If you yearn for a deeper life, a full life, a sane life, that is a door. So we'll get into our next writing exercise. My questions for you, and again, whatever comes, comes, don't judge it. I'll invite you just to be as free as possible in your writing practice. If you find yourself answering one of these questions, that's fine. If you want to spend time in all of them, again, also fine. We'll take another 10 minutes. My question is, what are your doors to the wild self? You can describe your journey to the door. What environments do you move through to find that door? You can describe the door, the color, the shape, the path to it, the structure holding it, if any. As you approach the door to the wild self, what do you notice about the space around you? What do you notice about what you feel in your body? What sensations do you notice and where? And what do you expect to find on the other side? We'll take 10 minutes. When you find yourself at a good stopping point, let's come back together. If you'd like to pause and take more time, that's totally fine. But I'll bring us into the next exercise. And I think about all of these together now and like looking at patterns that might show up, right? Thinking about, as you approach the door, what do you notice about the space around you? If it's helpful to find another way into that, looking back at the Adrienne Rich poem, right? Diving into the wreck and like thinking about the way that the ladder was approached and thinking about the way that the water and the color of the water began to change as they descended, right? So that's one way to consider it if you're looking for a model. That poem also, again, might be good to revisit. So I'm going to bring us through another poem now. This is Tom Hirons, Sometimes a Wild God. And again, we do have this in the poet's voice. So I'm going to play this for us so we have that audio, and then I'll show you the text on the screen.
Sometimes a wild god. Sometimes a wild god comes to the table. He is awkward and does not know the ways of porcelain, of fork and mustard and silver. His voice makes vinegar from wine. When the wild god arrives at the door, you will probably fear him. He reminds you of something dark that you might have dreamt, or the secret you do not wish to be shared. He will not ring the doorbell. Instead, he scrapes with his fingers, leaving blood on the paintwork, though primroses grow in circles round his feet. You do not want to let him in. You are very busy. It is late or early, and besides, you cannot look at him straight because he makes you want to cry. The dog barks. The wild god smiles and holds out his hand. The dog licks his wounds and leads him inside. The wild god stands in your kitchen. Ivy is taking over your sideboard. Mistletoe has moved into the lampshades, and wrens have begun to sing an old song in the mouth of your kettle. I haven't much, you say, and give him the worst of your food. He sits at the table bleeding. He coughs up foxes. There are otters in his eyes. When your wife calls down, you close the door and tell her it's fine. You will not let her see the strange guest at your table. The wild god asks for whiskey, and you pour a glass for him, then a glass for yourself. 3 snakes are beginning to nest in your voice box. You cough. Oh, limitless space. Oh, eternal mystery. Oh, endless cycles of death and birth. Oh, miracle of life. Oh, the wondrous dance of it all. You cough again, expectorate the snakes, and water down the whiskey, wondering how you got so old and where your passion went. The wild god reaches into a bag made of moles and nightingale skin. He pulls out a 2-reeded pipe, raises an eyebrow, and all the birds begin to sing. The fox leaps into your eyes. Otters rush from the darkness. The snakes pour through your body. Your dog howls, and upstairs your wife both exults and weeps at once. The wild god dances with your dog. You dance with the sparrows. A white stag pulls up a stool and bellows hymns to enchantments. A pelican leaps from chair to chair. In the distance, warriors pour from their tombs. Ancient gold grows like grass in the fields. Everyone dreams the words to long-forgotten songs. The hills echo and the grey stones ring with laughter and madness and pain. In the middle of the dance, the house takes off from the ground. Clouds climb through the windows. Lightning pounds its fists on the table. The moon leans in. The wild god points to your side. You are bleeding heavily. You have been bleeding for a long time, possibly since you were born. There is a bear in the wound. Why did you leave me to die? Asks the wild god. And you say, I was busy surviving. The shops were all closed. I didn't know how. I'm sorry. Listen to them. The fox in your neck, and the snakes in your arms, and the wren, and the sparrow, and the deer. The great unnameable beasts in your liver, and your kidneys, and your heart. There is a symphony of howling, a cacophony of dissent. The wild god nods his head, and you wake on the floor holding a knife, a bottle, and a handful of black fur. Your dog is asleep on the table. Your wife is stirring far above. Your cheeks are wet with tears. Your mouth aches from laughter or shouting. A black bear is sitting by the fire. Sometimes a wild god comes to the table. He is awkward and does not know the ways of porcelain, of fork and mustard and silver. His voice makes vinegar from wine and brings the dead to life.
And so
Sometimes a wild god.
that brings us to our next writing exercise together. I won't talk too much. But imagine that a version of your wild self is on the other side of the door that you've already written about. What do you notice about this wild self's appearance? How does the wild self feel as you cross the threshold? How do you greet one another? What does each of you most long to express to the other? Consider writing from one perspective, then the other. Perhaps a dialogue will emerge, or perhaps you will pass notes. I'll set the timer for 10 minutes. Of course, pause if you'd like to take more time. Whenever you find yourself at a good stopping point, we'll move on to one more poem that we'll look at together. Feel free to pause if you need to pause and keep writing. And so this piece is Cornelius Eady. The poem is titled Gratitude. I don't have it in his voice, but we do have the poet Kenyatta Rogers reading it. And so I'll play that for us while we look at it on the screen.
Gratitude by Cornelius Eady. I'm here to tell you also. This appears to be my work. I live in the world, walk the streets of Chicago, this dear city. I want to tell you, I'm 31 years old. I have lived in and against my blood. I want to tell you I am grateful because, after all, I am a Black American poet. I'm 31 and no one has to tell me about luck. I mean, after reading, someone asked me once, if you weren't doing this, what, if anything, would you be doing? And I said what we both understood. I'm a Black American male. I own this particular story on this particular street at this particular moment. This appears to be my world. I'm 31 years old, and all I have to do is repeat what I notice over and over. All I have to do is remember. And to the famous poet who thinks literature holds no small musicals, love. And to the publishers who believe in their narrow, there's no profit on the fringes, love. And to those who need the promise of wind, the sound of branches stirring beneath the line, here's another environment poised to open. Everyone reminds me what an amazing odyssey I'm undertaking, as well they should. After all, I'm a Black American poet, and my greatest weakness is an inability to sustain rage. Who knows what'll happen next? This appears to be one for the books. If you train your ears for what's unstated beneath the congratulation, that silence is my story. The pure celebration and shock of my face defies gravity. So to speak, I claim this time not just for myself, but for my parents who shook their heads. I am older now than my father was when he came, which is no big deal, except I have the knowledge of the wind that tilts the head down. And I claim the Lucy in the air glee on behalf of the social studies teacher I had in 10th grade, a real bastard who took me aside after class the afternoon he heard I was leaving for a private school just to let me know he expected me for drowning. That I held the knowledge of the drowning. The regret of ruined flesh in my eyes was not fair enough, except I believe I've been teaching far longer now than he had been doing. And I know the blessing of a narrow escape. And I claim this rooster pulled down warningly on behalf of anyone who saw me coming and said yes. Even when I was loud, cocky, insecure, even when all they had seen was the promise of a germ, even when it meant yielding ground, I am a bit older than they were when I walked into that room or a classroom or a party, and I understand the value of an unstated push. The lucky man gets to say his name. I have survived long enough to tell a bit of an old story. And to those who defend poetry against all foreign tongues, love. And to those who believe a drop clause signifies encroachment, love. And to the bullies who need the musty air of the clubhouse walls themselves, I am a brick in a house that is being built around your house. I'm 31 years old, a Black American poet. Nearly all the things that weren't supposed to occur have happened anyways. And I have a natural inability to sustain rage, despite the evidence. I have proof and a job that comes assembled to me as proof.
And so you may have noticed that Kenyatta Rogers took a few liberties adapting this poem in the reading. But I think the spirit of it, of course, remains. And so, in thinking about that, particularly in the expansive language used to define his relationship to poetry, I think I quote this poem frequently is that, to the bullies who need the musty air of the clubhouse all to themselves, I am a brick in a house that is being built around your house. And so, with that, I'll invite you to consider this last set of writing prompts for this particular exercise for this series. And so this is one again, you might want to take more than 10 minutes. You might want to take an hour. You might want to take 5. You might take 10 minutes with each of these prompts. And so the first question I have are some adjectives and images that you use to describe yourself. And so again, this might be helpful to look back at some of your earlier writing and your self-portrait, right? And thinking about how those might interplay, right? The words that people offer you, assign to you, right? But what are some of the words that you use to describe yourself? You could try completing the sentence, I am one who, and see how many different ways you might answer that question for yourself. Most important people in your life, in the story of your life. And so thinking about the Cornelius Eady poem, right? There are a lot of different people who he mentions pretty specifically and then vaguely that all shaped his journey into becoming the poet that he became. And who are some of the most important people in the story of your life, in the making of you? Where are you from, right? Also thinking about, right? Of course, in Cornelius Eady's poem, he mentions being from New York City, right? He talks about New York City. Kenyatta adapted that to Chicago, right? But what are the places that made you, the places that shaped you? This might be the name of a city or a town. This might be a country. This might be your bedroom. It might be your best friend's bedroom in middle school, right? So thinking about all of the places, it might be your favorite coffee house, the places that you couldn't possibly exist as the person you are today without these places. Those are the places that you might be considering writing about, where you're from, and really getting into like descriptive imagery around what those places are like, what they offered you. So what did they smell like, right? And coming back into those senses, right? What textures do you remember and do you associate with them? What temperatures? What does the air feel like and smell like in those places? What tastes? Of course, what sights? What sounds do you associate with the memory of this place? And there may be many places. Another question I have is, in what ways are you powerful? In what ways do you claim your own agency? Another possibility, complete this sentence in as many ways as possible. The worst fear of all is, we'll dive more into that in a few weeks. Another is like an opportunity to brag what you are best at. This could again be literal or figurative. I'm not going to make anyone prove it, right? But thinking about what's something you feel like you are very, very proud of yourself for being able to do? What's something that you feel really confident in your ability to do? What are you best at? So this might be staring at clouds. This might be, maybe you like literally are the best at doing some particular things and you want to take a minute to brag about that. Whatever that is for you, feel free. And finally, like we can pretend it's your birthday and you're about to blow out the candles, right? What do you hope or wish for? And as you look back and you review your writing from the prompts, where do you see mirrors? Where do you see connections? What do you find is missing? And so we'll take this last 10-minute break. I'm going to hush and let you write, and then we'll come back together and close. And whenever you feel like you're at a good stopping point, let's wrap. Of course, feel free to keep going for as long as you'd like to. You can mute me or pause and take as much time as you'd like. Thank you again for taking this time with yourself, for taking this time to write, to dive in. I'm not sure what you're brushing into, but I hope it opens some doors for you and you find some new things and some new ways into your own language and stories. And considering, right, the thing and not the story of the thing, maybe. And find some new textures and some new ways in. And feel free to revisit this as many times as you'd like to. I will leave you with a quick note from the one and only Mary Oliver. And then I will see you in lesson 2.
One day you finally knew what you had to do and began. Though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice. Though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do. Though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible, it was already late enough and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save.
Happy writing, everyone. I'll see you in lesson 2.